Boston Celtics hold off the Miami Heat. Jaylen Brown was awesome. Jayson Tatum, just about as good. But lots of lessons to be learned. Special bonus post-game edition of the Locked On Celtics podcast right now.
Be ever ready. Recognize the city of champs. Boston, baby, we do what you can't. Locked on number 18, Tatum and Brown, J-team, step back. We gon' wet that and slay teams. Of course, the Celtics, who else could it be? Screaming like KG with the Larry O.B. Karalis above average, assessing the team status. Best daily pod, no cap, salary matching. Clutch like Bird the DJ, keep John on replay. Prime time, dapping up the truth on the sideline. Raining J's, how it started, raising banners, how we finished. Locked on Celtics pod, home of the winners. B.
Welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for a special bonus post-game podcast, something I'm going to be doing here on these, especially these road games, these weekend games, just to give you a little something extra. Only going to do like 12 minutes or so here, so just want to introduce this bonus podcast, and I haven't been doing these in the past, but this season's, I think, going to be a little bit different. So I want to thank you for checking out the podcast. If you're new, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, including on YouTube. So subscribe there. I'm John Karalis, former professional basketball player, now covering the team for Boston Sports Journal. I've written a book called The Boston Celtics All-Time All-Stars. Boston Celtics win this game in Miami, 111-104. I think my big picture reaction is Jaylen Brown, awesome. Jayson Tatum, awesome. In stretches, not quite as good. Didn't have quite the same shooting night as you might expect him to have, but still, those two guys combining for 57 after combining for 75, 28 for Jaylen, 29 for Jayson. But a lot of lessons to be learned here. A lot of lessons, I think, for the Celtics overall to take out of this, especially for Joe Mazzulla, who I think had a little bit of trouble with the timeouts. There was one timeout situation where the Heat were on a big run in the third quarter, and he just kind of let it go a little too much. But the Celtics pulled out of that funk, and late in the game, you were waiting for him to call a timeout to stop things, maybe a timeout to get Jaylen Brown back in the game. He was out with his fifth foul late in the game, and they just waited and waited and waited to get him back in. And I think what happened was Mazzulla said, we're just going to let this ride because the Celtics were holding off Miami. And by the time it got down to the last minute or so, they got away with it. But let's make no mistake. They got away with not playing Jaylen Brown down the stretch. But this is where the depth is on display, because instead of playing Jaylen Brown, you play Malcolm Brogdon, and he's not as good as Jaylen, but obviously he's as capable. He's very capable in that spot. So if you have to go with Malcolm Brogdon down the stretch, that's not too bad. So you get to see how that depth and look, Brogdon did not have his best game at all. 7 points, 2 of 9 shooting, 1 of 3, but 3 offensive rebounds, 3 assists in a stretch there in the third quarter where the Celtics went on a 20-6 run. Brogdon was the guy who was getting into the paint, getting to the rim, and even though he was missing those 3 offensive rebounds, he kept the shots alive, and I thought that was huge because then he was able to keep. First of all, you make the other team work a lot harder, and it's demoralizing when you give up offensive rebounds. We all know how that goes. And it just led to Grant Williams for 3 and other baskets there. So I thought Brogdon was it was okay that the Celtics went with Brogdon down the stretch. And Brogdon, even though his stats don't show it, he was a big part of that run. Now, Jayson Tatum obviously was a big part of that run. 29 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal. But I thought the night belonged to Jaylen Brown. 12 of 18, 2 of 3 from 3, 2 of 2 from the line, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. Did have 3 turnovers and those 5 fouls. Those turnovers came late. Basically, the Celtics feasted on Miami when Bam Adebayo was off the floor. And when Bam Adebayo was on the floor, you look at the plus minus, he was a plus 20 and Dwayne Dedmon was a minus 18. That tells you a lot about how Bam Adebayo was impactful in this game. I don't think Jimmy Butler was all that impactful. I don't think it was basically Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero. There was a stretch where Tyler Hero was killing the Celtics. There was a stretch where Bam Adebayo was killing the Celtics. Kyle Lowry had some of his usual Kyle Lowry-ness in there. But the Celtics were able to build their leads when Bam Adebayo came off the floor and hold on when he was back in the game. Really a lot of the same stuff from the Celtics that we've seen in years past. That's something that I think is indicative of this team's road that they have left to go. There's after the Philadelphia game where they looked great. It's important. I think this game is important to show how this team, trying to word this correctly, how far this team still has to go, and that they're 2-0, but a team like Miami can still be problematic and give them trouble. I don't think anybody expected the East to be an easy run, and so getting this type of game in game 2, I think it's actually a good thing that the Celtics got tested the way they got tested. I'll continue this in a second. First, let me tell you about PrizePicks, which is daily fantasy made easy. You're making entries on 2 to 5 players, and you're picking the over-unders. So if you were picking Jaylen Brown tonight and you picked the over, you would have hit because he had 28 points and just a really awesome game. You can pick 2 to 5 players. Like I said, you can go to other sports. You can kind of manufacture this however you want to do it. It's just you against the numbers, which in daily fantasy is really important because usually it's you against other people. And that's where the pros and all of their stuff, it really puts you at a disadvantage. It's you against the projections in any league you want, all the major pro sports leagues, PGA, college sports, international sports, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, it's all there. 60 seconds or less to make an entry, safe and fast withdrawals, operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app, go to prizepicks.com, sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit 100, PrizePicks gives you 100. You deposit 50, PrizePicks gives you 50. Don't forget to enter the promo code and sign up for the instant match up to $100. That's at prizepicks.com or download the PrizePicks app. Let's continue this here for Boston. Like I said, Jaylen Brown was awesome in this game. Marcus Smart had an up and down game. I thought he early on in the post he had a back down on Hero in the post. He had a floater in the lane and then a hook shot, which was amazing to see. Then he had a bad stretch, and then he picked it up down the stretch there. Not a bad game, not a great game from Marcus Smart. One thing I want to mention with Jaylen Brown as I look at my notes, the first quarter, him against Kyle Lowry was such an interesting little battle because he had, I think this set the tone for Jaylen's night. He had 2 drives where Lowry is going to set up to take a charge. And what he did was avoid the charge, avoid the contact there, and just rise up above Kyle Lowry. That's a recognition in the moment of who you're facing and what you're up against. And it's seeing Kyle Lowry in your way and saying, the only thing he can do is take a charge. He's not going to block your shot. So great play there by 2 great plays early on by Jaylen against Lowry. And then on the other end, not falling for Lowry's crap, up fakes and pass fakes and all that stuff and getting a clean block on him. I thought Jaylen was great on both ends of the floor. Shout out to Derek White. Early on was perfect. Then he got into foul trouble and he tailed off. First half, Derek White was huge for the Celtics. Second half, Derek White was kind of just nowhere to be found because of the foul trouble. The Celtics in the third quarter got really, really foul happy, and that hurt them, and that hurt Derek White. He kind of was thrown off there. Grant Williams, got to shout out Grant Williams for hitting some big threes, some big rebounds, 7 rebounds and a couple of assists, 2 block shots there for him, 1 turnover, 10 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists for Grant. Very, very nice night. And some of the threes that he hit were pretty clutch. Shout out to Noah Vonleh. Noah Vonleh had one impressive spin move and dunk early in the game, and he didn't do a lot, but 4 points, 5 rebounds, 2 block shots. He did commit a couple of fouls. He continues to set illegal screens. He needs to clean that up. But Noah Vonleh, impressive early on, especially. Sam Hauser, 2 for 3 from 3, held his own defensively. The Heat went and attacked Sam Hauser defensively, and he didn't crumble. It's a strategy that didn't pay off for them. So I thought that was a really good sign after a tough game against the Sixers. I thought coming back, he made a really nice rebound there. Come back here, 13 minutes, hit a couple of threes, had a steal even. So good for Sam Hauser. And that's it. The Heat lack of size was certainly an issue. You heard Jeff Van Gundy mention it ad nauseum in that game. So overall, nice win for the Celtics, but Joe Mazzulla has a lot to take out of this. That, he could probably use his timeouts a little bit better. I think he will look at that film and probably have some conversations there and maybe learn from that. We'll see what he does in the coming days, how he uses his timeouts. But that was a big topic on Twitter, especially because people saying I don't remember when he's even called a timeout. So he was finally forced to call one. But Joe Mazzulla had a lot to learn. Celtics got a little turnover happy. They ended up with 19 turnovers, which is not good, especially after just 8 in the first half. Well, I shouldn't say just 8. Eight's not great in the first half. They had 4 through the beginning of the third quarter, and it just piled up from there. So they got the ball security has to get better. They got sloppy. Jaylen, after I tweeted out that he had a masterful game, he went on this weird stretch where he just a bunch of turnovers, bad play, fouls, offensive fouls. It was a weird stretch. Celtics kind of fell apart there. Luckily, they were able to get it back together. But plenty to learn from this game, but they come away with a win, and that's how you want it to go. There's early lessons. After the game, Jayson Tatum said, we're still figuring each other out, and that's true. So a good measure for these guys, a lot that they'll see on the film before the Orlando game, things that they can clean up, and they will, I'm sure, try to implement those things pretty quickly, but it's certainly they've got a long road to go. But you want to win those games where you learn those lessons versus losing the games where you learn those lessons. Now they have a tough one against Orlando on the back-to-back. We'll see if Al Horford plays. He played 33 minutes in this game, and he said he's planning on playing in the back-to-back, and Joe Mazzulla said he's planning on playing him in the back-to-back. So we'll see if Horford does that. And I'll be back after the Orlando game with another post-game wrap-up podcast. So if you're new to the podcast, subscribe. Usually I go 30 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more. But I'm just giving you shorter, quick-hitting reactions after these games on the weekends. Normally a Monday through Friday podcast, so subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Watch the show on YouTube. Hi, YouTube viewers. Ring the bell so you get notified that I'm dropping an episode. And comment. Feed the algorithm. And share the podcast with your friends, family, everybody. They should be listening to and watching the Locked On Celtics podcast here on the Locked On Podcast.